Hello everybody and welcome to the video. My name is Midway and today we're back again with a new update on the PTR for the reworked version of Holy Paladin. We're gonna check out what the new changes are for this reworked version of Holy Paladin, and we'll just go through them and look at what they look like. So I've already looked at them. This is not a first impressions. I've already done the video in Spanish, so let me just run you through them. So first of all, we have a new talent, Merciful Auras. We already had a talent pretty much like this one. So basically this talent is going to be healing 3 injured allies within 20 yards every 2 seconds for a flat amount that's not too big. But once you have Aura Mastery, it's actually going to be healing everybody for a 100% increase amount every 2 seconds. So you will... sorry, excuse me, I got a bit of a cold and my throat is kind of rough right now, but we are gonna have this talent down here. It's gonna be competing with Blessing of Summer, and it's basically just this same talent that we already had back, I believe it was in Legion. Not sure if I don't think it remained in BFA. I'm pretty sure it didn't. It was, oh, maybe it did, I don't know. It basically was just the padding option. It was an aura that you could just run and it would just be doing flat amounts of healing. You wouldn't have to think about timing or anything. When you pressed it, it would just be doing more healing. It's basically the same talent. Maybe it's capped a little bit lower on the amount of healing that it can do, like the amount of allies that it can heal. I'm not really sure how it worked back in the day, but nonetheless, it's just a padding option for more healing. If we might want to pick this, it's just going to be depending on the amount of HPS, I'm pretty sure. Blessing of Summer is still a pretty competitive talent, especially because of the mana we get from Blessing of Winter, as well as the damage we get from Blessing of Summer, etc, etc. We get so many good things out of Blessing of Summer. It's pretty much a mandatory pick in pretty much every form of content. So competing with it, I'm not really sure if we're going to ever be using Merciful Auras, but there could be the chance that it's like a padding talent that we can just choose for basically logging. That's pretty much what I'm thinking about when looking at this talent, because the amount of healing that it's doing, it's only 40% of spell power. It's not that huge, but it's obviously going to be HPS. It's obviously going to be showing in the meters. It might show in a better way than what you could get out of Blessing of Summer. It most likely will. So yeah, I'm thinking this might just be a padding option, but nonetheless, it's an interesting talent and it's another option. So since it's not mandatory, you can always just choose it. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. Now, awestruck increase the healing, the critical healing of Holy Shock, Holy Light, and Flash of Light by 20%. Used to be 15% up here. Just a little bit of above 5% increase on the critical healing. That's okay. I mean, more healing, more critical healing for Holy Shock is definitely good. But keep in mind that this talent is competing with the one that gives you 1 extra Holy Power when you use Crusader Strike. So yeah, it's gonna really be doing a lot of work there, because that Holy Shock critical healing increase will have to compete quite heavily with talent that's really powerful, because more Holy Power is always pretty much the best thing you can get for a Holy Paladin. So yeah, I'm not really sure if it's gonna be a big talent, but above there makes the choice a little bit harder. We'll see about that one. Seal of the Crusader healing increased by 30%, making this choice a little bit more interesting, especially now that the old version of Vanguard's Momentum, or however this talent was called in the past, yeah, that's gone now, so we don't have the option to extend the duration of wings by throwing Hammer of Wrath or Judgment. Now we have this other option with the increase or the extra charge of Hammer of Wrath, as well as the extra Holy Power when you use it as an execute below 20%. So basically this talent, Seal of the Crusader, now doing a little bit more healing, means we just do a little bit more padding with that. It's more HPS, it's more self-sustained, it's basically more padding just about that. If we are not in a situation where we are suffering from we're not dying basically, and we should not really be dying as Holy Paladins, we are so tanky, then this talent is pretty much just padding once again. But it's another option, and if it's being buffed, it's pretty cool, because obviously more HPS for Holy Paladins is more molding for all the other healers, and I'm all for that. So, Daybreak now triggers Glimmer of Light healing at 200%, was 150% value. That is very interesting. I really like that, because Daybreak is gonna be removing your glimmers. Remember, it's gonna be consuming them for the healing as well as the mana regen. And I'm pretty sure we're gonna be using this a lot because of the mana. If the mana sustain is gonna be hard, we're gonna be needing to rely a lot on Daybreak. So therefore, more healing coming out of it means that when you use Daybreak and you lose all those glimmers, you don't feel as bad, because it's gonna be more impactful. The burst of healing is gonna be better overall, right? Obviously it's a buff, and I've also heard it's pretty good spot healing in many different types of content, Mythic Plus and obviously PvP as well. So regardless, I don't really know if you're gonna pick this for PvP, to be fair, but you just might, because obviously it's gonna give you mana back, so that's always very important in arenas. Regardless, I like the buff. I like the addition of that little increase of the healing there, because it's gonna make this talent a lot more interesting to use. Now, Holy Shock also being reduced here in the mana cost. The base mana going from 2.6 to 2.4. This is massive. Holy Shock is going to be used a lot in the new rework version of Holy Paladin. Surely a lot more than when we are now playing Avenging Crusader, because we are pretty much ignoring Holy Shock for a long time once we have Wings active now. So this is gonna make us have a lot less problems with the self-sustain of the mana, but it's still, I'm not really sure, because I've really not tested this new rework version of Holy Paladin too much, and therefore it could still not be enough. I don't really know where the mana situation is laying for Holy Paladins. Regardless, this is most definitely a buff. It's gonna make our life a lot easier, and it's just gonna be allowing us to run for a lot longer with our mana, because we're gonna be using a lot of Holy Shock in this new version of the Holy Paladin. So now we have Flash of Light healing increased by 35%, was 25, and Holy Light increased by 25, was 15. 10% more increased healing on these two talents. That is also huge. Flash of Light is now becoming a very strong spot healing option, very useful in Mythic Plus, very useful in PvP, of course, and also at some point you might also use it in raids, but nonetheless it's not integral to the rotation in raids, so it's not that big of a deal in those situations. I'm thinking a lot more about Mythic Plus in particular, where you are going to be using some talents, for example Divine Favor, or the new talent that's going to make your Holy Light instant and do a lot more healing, Hand of Divinity. Those two talents combined with this increase in the spot healing potential of Flash of Light for emergency situations, as well as Holy Light being a lot stronger combined with those talents, is gonna make up for a lot of very big bursty potential, as well as having another tool to lead to aid yourself in situations where you might be a bit desperate. So I'm really liking these buffs over here, even though it's more casting options. Don't be a doomer. Casting is not forbidden. It's not a thing you should avoid. At some point you might want to be casting, and if the buffs just keep coming, you will have to cast. It's not gonna mean that you're just gonna be relying on those spells. I don't think that's ever gonna happen ever again for Holy Paladins. Regardless, having the option and having those talents being viable and strong is most definitely a very good thing, and I think that's a very good direction for Holy Paladin. Now, Blessing of Seasons shares a choice node with Merciful Auras. We already saw that. It's down here. It's going to be competing with Blessing of Seasons. Then Tears of Deliverance base duration has been increased to 20 seconds, was 10 seconds. Obviously, Tears of Deliverance is down here. Now, that's going to be double the duration, the base duration. However, they've also reduced or capped the amount of extension you can have from Boundless Salvation onto Tears of Deliverance only to 40 seconds, whereas it was 50 seconds before. That's basically taking 10 seconds of extension away from Boundless Salvation and putting them on top of Tears of Deliverance. I think that's a buff nonetheless. The base talent from Tears of Deliverance, it kind of felt a little bit weak with only, it was 12 seconds base duration. Now it's 12 seconds, it was 10. Never mind, I've just been completely dumbfounded. I thought it was 20 for some reason. I completely read it wrong. Regardless, yeah, no, there we go. It's the opposite thing. It's the base duration here, and then the healing increase effect is how it increased to 12 seconds was 10 seconds, right? So that is a different thing. However, I still think that this is most definitely a big buff, and it's definitely going to be very interesting for this talent to be a lot stronger on its own. That's the idea here, to make the base talent just be stronger on its own, so as the choice to be a bit more meaningful, and it's not a matter of whether you reach all the way down here to Boundless Salvation to make this talent viable, or you just pick one thing on its own and therefore you kind of want to be using that. So it adds a little bit more spice to the whole choices down here on the lower part of the tree. That's basically what it's saying down here. It's just they are trying to make these choices a little bit more equal, even, so that they are more interesting. Now, Holy Prism reduces healing or damage targets now to 30 yards, within 30 yards. Before it was 15 yards, they've doubled it, which is very interesting, because before you could have situations where you're spot healing somebody and there's not enough targets to get the damage thrown out onto everything that's around that person, for example, especially when you're using it on ranged people. If you're doing that on Mythic Plus. If you are doing that on raids, you're more than likely going to be using it on the boss for the spread healing. However, that could also be a situation where you're using it on something and there's no 5 players within 15 yards. Very rare, but it could happen. So with this, you're pretty much guaranteeing, or at least increasing the chances a lot more, of the healing and the damage of the Holy Prism talent to be useful and actually happen. Now, of course, remember that this talent is only being really used right now because of the tier set, and once this is gone, we're more than likely going to be going back to using Light's Hammer, as it's much more of a stronger option in many of the scenarios. But yeah, Holy Prism is being buffed as well, baseline, right? So I don't know, we could also be using this in other scenarios. I'm just saying this is pretty much a temporary thing. We don't really care too much about Holy Prism unless we're running the tier set. Now, Hammerwrap now has a cost of 1% of base mana. That is quite significant. Even though it's only 1%, obviously, you're not going to be using Hammerwrap all that much. You only can use it when you have Wings active and when the target is low HP. But once again, more abilities that did not have a mana cost before, now they are going to be having one. So it's adding more stress onto the managing of the mana for us Holy Paladins. Anyways, I don't really know if it's how difficult it's going to be to manage this mana. Anyways, I don't really care too much about it right now, but it's going to be a thing that once we see how the mana feels for Holy Paladins, it's really going to be taking its impact, and it's gonna be showing how big of a toll this is gonna be adding on to us, basically. Glimmer of Light healing increased by 400%, was 450. Now, that's quite a significant nerf. They already nerfed it down from 500 now to 450, and now all the way to 400. It's gonna mainly affect Mythic Plus and raids, of course. That's where you get the most out of Glimmer of Light, especially in raids. Excuse me, I need to drink some water right here. But yeah, especially in raids, that's going to be quite significant. That's a lot of healing you're going to be losing from that. And yeah, well, I don't really know. They're moving some power away from that. Maybe they just don't want Holy Paladin to be that intense on the Glimmer healing. They might think that it might be too much. I don't really know. It's just a little bit of tuning. It could still be fine, but that's a pretty significant nerf. Once again, everything else is buffs right now, so that's definitely an interesting change. The fact that they're moving power away from that and onto other things is also quite an interesting thing, but nevertheless, just a little bit of a nerf, some tuning happening. I'm not too mad about it, but definitely a nerf. Now, I was saying that the previous video was a lot more focused on the nerfs, and in fact, even though it was all nerfs, or pretty much everything was nerfs, it does not mean that Holy Paladin is in a bad spot on the rework, on the PTR. It does seem like it's gonna be very, very strong. In fact, it might be the best healer. People are saying that it's gonna be the best healer on Mythic Plus, and it's looking very good for rating as well. I'm just saying that the previous video, it was pretty much all nerfs, and even though they might be warranted and it's just tuning, I obviously talked about it as if it was all nerfs, right? So that's just how I did it. Maybe a little bit of clickbait, it is what it is, but it's just, it doesn't mean that Holy Paladin is bad, it just means that that was what it is for those changes. These changes seem to be a lot more positive, and pretty much everything is just buffs, so I'm pretty happy with it. And now, lastly, yeah, the starter build has not been updated. I don't really care too much. The starter build is just the option that Blizzard gives you when you can choose those talents basically for as a baseline, but you can always change those, so that's what we're gonna be all doing. So regardless, I don't really care. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please excuse my voice. I really got a cold this week, so yeah, hope it wasn't too rough. But in any case, I'll see you on the next one. Hope you enjoyed it, and that's it. Bye bye. See ya.